Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. On Capitol Hill today, Republicans removed Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee. Democrats call it a political stunt, but Speaker McCarthy tells us Omar's past comments put America in jeopardy. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports from Capitol Hill.
On a strict party line vote, the House has officially prevented Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Although she is still allowed to serve on other committees, all Democrats opposed this, with all Republicans supporting it except for one Republican who did vote present. Republicans argue that Omar is unfit to serve on foreign affairs because of past anti-Semitic comments that she made, although she has since publicly apologized for those comments. Here's Omar reacting just moments prior to today's vote.
I am Muslim. I am an immigrant. Is anyone surprised that I am being targeted?
Democrats argue this is political revenge to get back at Democrats after they kicked off members like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar during last Congress from all of their committees. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene expressing the difference from her perspective.
The difference with Ilhan Omar is her statements were as a member of Congress. She called our military the same as the Taliban, which is absurd. She's only being removed off of one committee. They removed me off of all committees.
Democrats also argue that this move by House Republicans is not productive. I asked the Democrat minority leader what the difference is now versus back when they kicked those other members off of their committees. Here's what he said. The Democrats' position is that it's not productive for House Republicans to bring this vote up on Omar. If that's the case, in your eyes, why was it more productive in the last Congress to vote figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene off committees?
The line should be drawn when there are members of Congress who are actively threatening violence. Why haven't House Republican leaders denounced any of the things that have been said by their members?
And later I asked Speaker McCarthy what his reaction is to this argument. Here's what he told me.
They're totally wrong. She said the American military was equal to Hamas and the Taliban. She said on 9/11, as a member of Congress, as an individual who's sitting on foreign affairs, something happened that day. What does that say to other people around the world? But it puts America in jeopardy.
And McCarthy says he is working right now with the House Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries on creating a code of conduct to hold members responsible for misconduct. This would be a group of Republicans and Democrats working together to create a set of conduct rules that would be applicable to this Congress and future Congresses. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Today, House Republicans and a majority of Democrats voted to condemn the horrors of socialism. They debated the resolution on the floor, with some Democrats voting against it. They accused Republicans of wanting to cut Social Security and other social programs. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
This resolution is a simple one. It states that the Congress denounces socialism in all its forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policies in the United States of America.
But not everyone thought the resolution was so simple. Many Democrats said it was a way for Republicans to one day cut Social Security, Medicare, and other social programs. So Representative Patrick McHenry added this.
Despite my Democratic colleagues' claims, there's nothing in this resolution about entitlement programs or banning social services or anything of the like.
The resolution explains that socialist ideology has time and time again collapsed into communist regimes, totalitarian rule, and brutal dictatorships. It also lists the millions of people killed under socialist regimes throughout history.
So what does the Democratic Party believe? We believe every person in America should have child care. And what is the Republicans? What do they say? Their answer, well, look at how many people Stalin killed. We say, let's give everyone health care. The Republicans say, well, we can't do that. Look at how many people Pol Pot killed.
I have seen the victims of socialism firsthand. Many of those victims have found refuge in Nebraska. Vietnamese is the third most spoken language in Nebraska due to immigration in the 1970s. And members of the Falun Gong have found freedom from religious persecution by the Chinese Communist Party in our great state. History shows us that when socialism is tried, it leads to three things: poverty, devastation, and ultimately communism.
And Representative Mike Lawler says that communism has put people into a permanent state of poverty and government dependence, while capitalism has lifted people from poverty to prosperity in a single generation.
It's very simple. This is not about Social Security or Medicare. This is about denouncing socialism. And if you can't muster the strength to do that, that speaks volumes about your party. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker and members, I want to reiterate, I love
the members
I love Social Security. I love Medicare. And so now I yield.
Although all of the Democrats who spoke were against the resolution, the majority of Democrats voted in favor of it. And with all Republicans in favor, the resolution to denounce the horrors of socialism was passed. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And to discuss the House bill denouncing socialism, we sat down with Congresswoman Ashley Hinson of Iowa earlier today. She's a member of the newly formed House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party as well. She'll also tell us the threats posed by socialism and the CCP, especially the threat in her own state of Iowa. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Congresswoman, the House today is voting on a bill to denounce socialism, highlighting its failures. Why do you think this is important at this moment?
Well, I think it sends a message to the American people. We're not going to tolerate this creep, and that's really what it is. It's a creep of those policies in our federal government. After 2 years where we saw the government overexert itself, we continue to see that happen through the executive branch overreach and through policies passing on the House floor. We need to be very clear about where we stand, that the American people are not going to tolerate this. We've seen this experiment fail time and time again, and socialism is that pathway to more extreme forms of government like communism and Marxism. So I watched a lot of the debate on the floor this week. A lot of my colleagues came to talk about some of the atrocities that have happened when this creep has been allowed in. And so my colleague Maria Salazar from Florida represents, I think, one of the districts with the highest number of Cuban refugees in the country. They literally fled socialism. They know what that horror looks like. They know what a dictator looks like. And so it's our opportunity to send a very clear signal to the American people. House Republicans are not going to let that happen.
Speaking of socialism and communism, you actually sit on the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. If you could tell us, what is the objective of your work going to be?
Plain and simple, China, the Chinese Communist Party is our greatest threat. We have been asleep at the wheel for years, letting them. You talk about the creep, it's very real here. It's a creep when they're stealing our intellectual property. They're coming to states like Iowa, literally stealing our seeds and trying to take them back to China to reverse engineer them. And then you look at the military threat and the geopolitical threat to our allies. So it is very clear that we need to take the Chinese Communist Party very seriously, and we need to present a policy blueprint for how the United States can remain competitive with them so that the next century is filled with one of American values, not Chinese Communist Party values.
The Chinese Communist Party is one of the world's greatest human rights abusers. This is what some say their greatest or biggest Achilles heel. Yet so often when world leaders meet with high-ranking CCP officials, it's often human rights is overlooked or just touched upon lightly. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's something we definitely need to spotlight, and that I think will be a large role of our committee. President Xi has turned a blind eye to it or willingly allowed it to happen. The abuses that are happening not only to the Uyghur Muslims in China and forced slave labor, but the true oppression of its people. They're holding their people back on purpose. You wonder why members of the Chinese Communist Party have to have the security that they do. It's because they're afraid of their people, because if their people really knew what was going on, I think they would be revolting. So it's our job to, again, expose those things and then deliver policies that are going to help us to counter not only those abuses, how can we hold them accountable, but also making sure we're presenting military solutions to make sure we can have that strong defense. Making sure we have the ability to rehome key manufacturing products. For instance, if they're using slave labor, I think we passed a resolution already to not support any products or services that are coming from places that use that slave labor. So we need to be intentional and send a very clear and direct message that we're not going to tolerate that behavior.
Congresswoman, you're from Iowa, obviously a very big agriculture state, farming state. The CCP has had their eyes on American agriculture and farmland dating back to 1985 when Xi Jinping spent quite a bit of time in Iowa. What do the American people need to know about these acquisitions?
Yeah. Well, it's a threat, plain and simple. You look at strategically where they have decided that they want to make those land purchases in Iowa, in key agricultural states, near our military bases, which I think is probably the most alarming thing when I'm looking at protecting our nation's secrets, training our military men and women, whether it's in the Dakotas or down in Texas near the Air Force Base there, where we literally train our Air Force pilots and the Chinese are buying land. So it is definitely something, again, I think we have been asleep at the wheel to allow this to happen. So we have a number of members on our committee who this has happened in their states and in their districts. You look at the percentage of increase in the land that the Chinese have bought over the last 10 years, it's grown exponentially. So this is a very real threat. We need to balance very carefully foreign investment. We don't want to deter all foreign investment in this country. We are a global economy, and I think it goes without saying that our members are going to be very intentional in understanding that relationship. But they are our biggest threat, and they are literally in our backyard. So it's time we hold them accountable and we do something to make sure that they can't aggressively move forward with these types of land purchases.
Iowa Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Biden calling for unity amid the debt ceiling stalemate. Yet a top Senate Democrat says Biden has not changed his mind. NTD's Iris Tao has more on the latest interaction between Biden and the House Speaker.
Less than 24 hours after his first one-on-one meeting with the Republican House Speaker, President Biden sitting right next to Kevin McCarthy at a National Prayer Breakfast on Capitol Hill. And Biden saying they will treat each other with respect.
Doesn't mean we're going to agree and fight like hell, but let's treat each other with respect.
And Biden calls for unity, highlighting the importance of faith in the American identity.
The soul makes us us. It's embodied in the sacred proposition that we're all created equally in the image of God.
Biden and McCarthy are at odds over the debt ceiling. Republicans are pushing for spending cuts. McCarthy said after meeting with Biden,
I think at the end of the day, we can find common ground.
But a Senate Majority Leader, who said he spoke to Biden before and after that meeting, said on Thursday that Biden hadn't changed his mind.
He had the same position. We should pass the debt ceiling clean.
McCarthy says Biden would call him in a couple of days to set up their next meeting. Meanwhile, as Biden's gearing up for his State of the Union speech, McCarthy announced that Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be delivering GOP's rebuttal to Biden's speech next Tuesday. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.